Welcome to ESD School, brought to you by ATRACT. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single episode. Enjoy the video.
Dear all, so today we will see a complete but very short esophageal ESD for a small neurinoma, a nervous tumor with a pathology that was a little with doubt on the malignant or benignant component. And finally, the cancer center close to our hospital validated an indication of ESD to be sure. And this case will be performed with two guys, me for the initial part of the incision, the tunneling to be sure that we can pass under the lesion, but the two sides of the lesion were performed by one of our trainee under supervision. So it's also a way to show you how we supervise and how we are organized for training of people. Hope it will be helpful for you. So here we are front of the lesion. You will see it soon. It is a very small lesion, a tiny submucosal tumor of 3 or 4 millimeter. But US was not perfectly clear to be sure if it was possible to dissect between the lesion and the muscle, or if it is touching or tracting the muscle. So first we decided to inject on the oral side with a needle, because the strategy was to do a tunneling from the beginning, pass under the lesion, and therefore be sure that it is possible to dissect in between the muscle and the lesion before completely choosing the strategy. I mean between stair and conventional dissection. The main difference is should we damage the muscle or not. If there is no damage on the muscle, it is easy to do a conventional dissection. But on the opposite, if there is a damage on the muscle, stair could be the best option. You can see that at this moment I was afraid of disappearance of the lesion because of my injection. So to be sure I will recognize the lesion once injected, I did one dot on the mucosa to be sure that it will not disappear during the further injection of the tunnel. So first I do the small hole. You can see here that the incision is not perfectly deep enough because we can see the muscularis mucosa remaining, and therefore we will do a small incision at the size of the cap in order to be sure we will be able to enter into the channel without any difficulty, without any damage on the muscle. So our goal is to do the shape of a small smile, not very deep, but at least a very beginning smile, in order to have a shape that is easy both to enter for the tunnel and therefore later to be cut if a conventional ESD is chosen. So once doing this shape, it is usually relatively easy to enter, but it is still easier to use underwater insertion because it makes the flap floating. Sometimes the early beginning is a little unstable because you should enter really in the channel to have stability before being really under the mucosa. The scope is not stable because not stabilized by the tunnel itself. And after, I like tunneling for this indication of submucosal small tumor because it is one of the best way to stay close to the muscle and to have a relatively deep dissection, because it is, I think, really important to be as deep as possible for this kind of lesion, but also for malignant esophageal lesion, because you want to have the deepest margin you can get. And in this case, I wanted both to be close to the muscle without any damage. So here there is a vessel, we coagulate it, prepare it, and therefore follow our dissection. Sometimes there is still a small bleeding, which is easy to control if you have let enough space of the vessel, and then we go straight, trying to stay close to the muscle, controlling the direction here. It seems that we are going under. Once again, underwater helps to enter into the channel. We will try, because we are close to the muscle, to stay very close to the muscle layer, to be deep enough. Okay. You can sometimes face the muscle with the scope, because you control what you are doing. In the esophagus, we really try to protect the muscle as much as possible. Contact is not really a good idea if we can avoid it. So it is one organ where, yes, we want to be close to the muscle, but not touching it. In the rectum, for example, touching the muscle is really not a big issue. So if possible, we are very close in the rectum, even if we should touch it. And in the esophagus, we should be a little more cautious and keep a kind of protection. Here we can see that in fact we are under the lesion at the anal side, and therefore we can change our strategy. Not for the stare is not mandatory, and a conventional ESD removing the mucosa and the lesion is possible. So now we have to work on the distal edge of the tunnel in order to open the space and be able later to find the end of the tunnel. So here you see I work a little more in order to do a relatively large incision, because sometimes we can miss the exit of the tunnel because it is not large enough. It is important also to control the vessels relatively quickly in the esophagus in order to avoid mixing blue injection and blood in the submucosa. It is always more difficult to analyze the submucosa and to see where we are if we have not a perfect blue injection but a mix of blood, because when you use the knife, for example, it is usual to have a kind of carbonization, a lot of dark tissue when there is blood into the submucosa. So while dissecting, stopping the vessels quite quickly when they are in the submucosa is an important point in order to avoid this kind of mix of blood and injection solution in the submucosa that makes the resection more difficult. So here we will do the two sides of the incision in order to complete our resection. Gravity is on the left, so I usually prefer to begin by the left, because if I begin by the right side, it will fall on the left and become more difficult. But in an easy case like this, everything is possible. But it's a little more logical to begin by the difficult side. I do small dots to be sure I will have the margins. Okay. Here I'm explaining to my fellow how to perform, and he will take the end under supervision. So that's why we stop the flow of the procedure, because I want to explain and make two dots to be sure he will have the good direction and not losing himself in the area. So here you can see that he took the hand, so we can see that he works a little more far, and it's a little more difficult to keep the good axis. It's a lot of training to be sure of this. Here you should find a way to have a kind of opposition of the tissue, but without creating a fold, which is more difficult to cut. I was not totally happy here because I wanted him to go on the dot and not in the dot, but it was okay. Finally, we have margin. Stability should be worked also, because if the everything is moving more, it's more difficult. To keep this stability, it's very important to put the cap on the mucosa, because it makes a point of stability, a point where you can push and stabilize yourself. If you are everywhere in the without any contact with the cap, it is far more difficult, because you are dependent of the respiratory movement, everything. So keeping the contact between the cap and the mucosa is for me something very important. It's exactly the same than writing your name without touching the table. If you are writing with your hand in the air, you write your name very large. If you put your hand on the table and write, you will be able to do very small movement and write your name more shortly in a little space. It is the same in ESD. If you want to work precisely, you should be fixed on something. It means making a contact with the cap on the table. So here we are still with one of our fellow. I don't remember exactly if I take again the end or not, but we will see. So here I inject. He began by the left side, because gravity was more helping on this way, and later he will do the right one. So once again, the goal is to have the electrode at the good depth, but the ceramic at the surface, sliding on the mucosa. The approach is slightly too perpendicular in this case, but here it's better. You slide better, and you should achieve your incision completely. So a good way to avoid doing not enough incision when you try to reach another incision is to do incision and then trimming in the same movement. So you are sure that you do a complete movement of incision and not only one part. So I don't know exactly, but possibly we will change again. I will see it. So re-injection is important now. We have to cut the two sides of the tunnel in this case. Re-injection, and then trying to go outside. Coagulation of the small vessel. It was a small lesion, so finally we decided to avoid using traction and to use an underwater strategy in order to save clips and save waste using the same material. And I think I took the end again for the end and the underwater strategy, because the fellow was not really used to underwater strategy, and therefore we did first the most difficult part, I mean the left side, because it was at the bad gravity side, and therefore we did the right one. So in our unit for supervision, we really usually do like this, I mean small part of the procedure, because one of the problem of training people is the time of procedure, and therefore it is easier to give the end many times, 4, 5, 10 minutes, but you still have the control on the whole flow of the procedure and therefore the complete duration of the procedure than doing complete procedure where the duration is more difficult. So in our unit, usually you have the first, which is animals and simulation, then supervision with very small part of the procedure but many times. I mean, there are around 5 procedures per schedule, so usually in 2 rooms, so 10 procedures in the morning, and people can touch 2 or 3 times for 5 or 10 minutes every day. And later, when they become confident and relatively safe, we can change to another room for easy cases, and they are alone, but we are in the room close to them in case of very big problem or in case of needing advice. So ESD in the esophagus is not that difficult because the tube is straight, but the risk of perforation is not acceptable because perforation in the esophagus has more consequences than in the rectum. So it should be kept for expert or under very strict supervision to train people, but without risk for the patient. Many tricks exist like tunnel plus clip, pulley, ATRACT and line, but I really think that traction and tunneling save time, but in easy case, underwater is a very good option to go fast and keep a kind of floating. Easy cases can be treated by conventional techniques to save time and to save waste, and also to keep training on using the cap for exposure, because as you know, traction is very helpful for difficult cases, but you still need to be able to go under the lesion and be able to expose yourself thanks to the cap that helps you to go under the mucosa. So keep easy case with easy means and conventional strategy to stay very trained for more difficult parts in order to do your incision very quickly and easily before putting traction for difficult cases. I hope it was helpful and see you later. Thank you very much.